Hey there summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides video. In response to popular requests, we are going to cover 3 skills today that you need for every rank in order to improve and climb. And a lot of these tips are applicable for all players, but we are going to organize this video by covering which skills that we think are the most impactful for specific ranks of players. For today's question of the day though, what is one thing that you wish you were better at? I'm still working on my farming, and honestly, even after all of these games, I'm still a little bit disappointed that I consistently can still miss some cannon minions, and it feels pretty bad. Are you getting ganked in your own lane? Constantly demolished? Well, don't worry, because we've got you covered, since ProGuides is the #1 proven way to quickly level up your League of Legends skills. Whether you're looking for tier lists, champion guides, coaching, or even courses from your favorite pro players, ProGuides is where you'll find them. Even players like Nightblue, Bunnyfufu, and Locodoco support ProGuides. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below to start improving. And with that being said, let's get started with this video by talking about Iron and Bronze. Alright, our very first tip for those of you in Iron and Bronze is to focus on your champion's strength. No matter what champion you play, you want to play to that champion's talents and what they are good at. It wouldn't make much sense to pick someone who's good at peeling, then proceed to dive the backline every fight. This is applicable to every elo, but especially in lower elos. The higher that you climb, the more players understand what their champions do well, so eventually this will become second nature. Now, since we're talking about Iron and Bronze specifically, you'll want to pick champions who deal a lot of damage. Seriously, champions that deal a lot of damage will typically be the strongest candidates to carry games if you're playing top, mid, or bottom. As a support, this matters a little bit less, and you also can find success by playing a champion who provides a lot of crowd control. In the jungle, damage is still very important, but ideally you'll play someone who also has crowd control, that way your ganks become easier. Bottom line though, you don't have to play these champions. Whatever character you pick, use them for what they're good for. If you play a tank, you need to hard engage and support your team. If you pick a peeling support, defend your teammates' lives at all costs. While this all sounds very straightforward, you don't see how many times we see lower elo players flashing on somebody as a level 2 Kassadin and saying, wow, I can't believe I lost that 1v1. You just have to know when your champion spikes, what they do best, and how you can use them to win. Another thing to note about lower elos is that players have a very poor understanding of macro play as a whole, and as a result of this, split pushing is much more viable, since a lot of the time the enemy will have absolutely no idea what to do against you. If there's a rank where you can realistically run it down a side lane and ignore your team for the entire game, it's going to be these really low elos. There's a time and place though. If you get extremely fed and you know that you can carry a team fight, then there isn't a reason not to, since they are going to be more rewarding. The point we're trying to make is to not teamfight if it's not necessary. Split pushing is still very powerful in lower elos and even high elo, but a little bit less effective around the mid elo ranges. This is because in lower elos, players won't optimally stop you, but in high elo, if opponents send several members to stop you, your team will know how to react properly and capitalize. In the middle elos, your team might be able to not utilize the pressure that you create, and they also might answer you a little bit better. Finally, this is going to sound strange at first, but seriously, wave management is actually not as important in the lower elos as it is in high elo. In spite of this, it's still a very valuable skill to have if you're Iron or Bronze, because in high elo, if you don't have great wave management, you'll get punished, bullied, and abused to the point where you don't even get to play the game. But in lower elo, you can play the game without understanding a single thing about wave management, but we're telling you that it's important to have. The specific reason we're telling you to understand it is if you think about it, if you do understand, you will have a huge lead on your opponent and a huge gap in knowledge. When used properly, your opponents may not understand the proper responses to freezing or to try to fight you when you're slow pushing a wave. In other words, you can get a lot of benefits from using wave management in lower elo, whereas in high elo, it's simply a mandatory skill that you will have to have. Alright, next up, let's talk about silver to low platinum. By the time you've hit silver, you've probably gotten pretty good at one or even a couple of things. It's around the silver to low platinum range that we suggest you guys begin mastering a champion. You've certainly heard over and over again that one-tricking or maining a champion is going to be the best way to climb, and usually that holds true. Having a strong mastery over one champion, especially in these tiers, can often lead to winning matchups that you technically shouldn't. Even in unfavorable matchups, the better player can always win. You'll start learning little things about your champions, like when they hit power spikes, what levels are the best for fighting, and any unique mechanics that they might have. Get comfortable on whoever you play, as they'll be your tool for success. This is also a great elo range to start taking advantage of poor vision. Some players would still consider silver to low platinum as low elo, partially because of the very poor level of macro play. Sure, rotations and focus on objectives is much better, but the vision game is still very bad. Players do not value control wards at all, and warding is still very suboptimal, especially where they place the wards. Most players use their wards, but they'll place it very shallow rather than for deep vision, and it's still not something that's on the top of their priority list. Think about it like this, whether it's yourself or even playing against people in this elo range, if they push the wave, do they usually go and deep ward the jungle? Probably not. They probably just overextend and try to hit the turret plates. You can capitalize on this by utilizing sweepers and buying control wards for yourself to completely eliminate whatever poor vision control the enemy places down. A dark map makes it much easier for you to make picks, catch out overextended opponents as we said, and of course also roam. With that said, it's also appropriate to move on to the next skill, which is roaming. You really want to roam, and this is the best elo to take advantage of roaming. Players are super disrespectful, overconfident, and still not that great at keeping track of their minimap. In addition to the very poor vision control that we just mentioned, players will oftentimes overextend. Take advantage of this by creating gank opportunities to roam to other lanes. If you're a jungler, this tip should instead just be gank in all caps. Seriously, just go to a lane and try to gank them because you might actually pick up a bunch of free kills. As long as you don't miss 2 waves for a roam, the amount of gold that you receive and deny for your opponent is worth way more than 2 waves of minions. Ideally though, you will utilize good wave management to minimize your losses so you can get the most bang for your time. Aside from efficiency of roaming also tilts your opponents, of course, so successful repeat ganks or roams can tilt players into giving up, since a lot of them won't know how to recover or adapt to their circumstances. You ever see people just complain all game that they got camped? Well, this is the best place to make sure that you can continue to do that. Now with those skills out of the way, let's talk about Platinum to Diamond, which is one of the harder elos to get out of because you kind of have to be able to make that next jump into really high elo. From high platinum onwards, macro play is going to be your key, and that's what's really hard about this elo. You need to understand how important objectives are and the proper ways to react to them. Aside from this, you also need to start learning how far you can really go in terms of taking them. After a successful team fight, how much more can you get in that span of time? This ties directly into our next point as well, but let's talk a little bit more about objectives first. It's difficult to disagree with the statement that Baron is the most important objective in the game. Yes, Elder Dragon is strong, but the map pressure that Baron creates is immense and crushing. What our analysts believe is important is understanding every situation where it's possible to take Baron. Sometimes teams will kill a single enemy and not even consider the option of taking Baron. However, you'll find that there are many times where one kill is all you need to take Baron, and players don't act on this optimally, especially if the person that you killed is the jungler or a very fed enemy laner. Regardless of what objective it is, you really have to learn to play around it. Every teamfight or every action you take should have the purpose of taking some objective. Why are you split pushing in the top lane? Well, to create pressure away from the dragon. You'll force your opponents to make a move around the dragon pit, otherwise lose turrets in the top lane. Why start dragon? Well, because it's difficult to find fights, so you want to force your opponents to come to you if you're ahead. These are the kind of things that you need to think about objectives. Now, like we mentioned a moment ago, another skill that you need in this rank is understanding your limits. Test your limits and learn them. Whether it's how many turrets you can take given a specific situation, or how low you can start a 1v1 fight and still win, the fundamental concept is still the same. Knowing how far you can take something is one of the most crucial pieces of information in all of League of Legends. Now listen, to be fair, this is a skill that requires both a big brain and big brawn to make sure that you can capitalize on it. Arbitrarily throwing out an example, maybe you know that you can beat Aatrox as Aurelia as long as you stack up your passive, dodge his second Q by dashing behind him, and then dodging his third Q by flashing to avoid it. Well, first you need to know this as a fact. Second, you need to be able to react to this, and also the specific example isn't very difficult, but think about it like this. Aside from literally watching somebody else do it, like watching a high-elo stream, you really have to do this through experience, and this is the kind of information that you have to learn yourself. Don't run it down and take dumb fights, but you should fight or move when it seems reasonable, and it should be something that you experiment with and then learn from. Take mental notes or physical one, that way you can retain the knowledge and utilize it in the future. While macro play and general player skill is still far from perfect here, you can't deny that it's still an improvement from the ranks below it. This is simply how ranking systems should work. At some point, players begin to have a general idea of how their lane should play out and what they should be doing. If both players have a better idea of what they should be doing, this also means that the game becomes more difficult to randomly pick up 3 kills or to hard smurf and carry every single game. This is when you need to start understanding how important it is to do something, which is let yourself get carried. Yes, it feels bad sometimes when you can't do anything and have to rely on your team, but this is a skill in itself and it should not be underrated. Even professional play takes into consideration how effectively a player can carry games when taking into account how much resources they've received. If you've ever seen gold graphs or analysts talk about professional games and how much certain players on some teams get from their team, players like Doublelift consistently get so many resources from their team. You have to learn. No, you can't just try to learn. You have to learn how to do your job even when you're being camped, or when no one else on your team is coming to help you. Sometimes it's the right move to leave you alone, even if it feels bad for you during that game. You have to learn to humble yourself. You have to learn to build tanky, and you have to learn to just be a better teammate, because there will be games where you aren't the superstar. And as soon as you get over that, and as soon as you let people carry you because you soaked pressure, the more games you can start winning. All of these skills continue to apply and remain very important into more elite brackets as well. Finally, we get to those people just below Challenger, from Diamond to Master. And if you want to push further, you really need to master your champion. So let's call this section Part 2 of Champion Mastery. At this point, if you've hit Diamond 2 and you think you're a good one trick and you know your champion, listen, you gotta be the champion at this point. Okay, that's a joke, but you might as well be, because you have to know everything, and I mean everything about them to continue improving. You have to be able to look at the best players on specific champions and then take a hard look at yourself and ask yourself what's different. If you're already this high elo and want to continue climbing, you have to be real with yourself. If you want to climb as high as that one challenger one trick, you need to be as good as them on that champion. Learn the intricacies and emulate the play of better players. The best and most real statement I ever heard about this game, and the best advice I've ever received, is that you can never be so sure that you are the best that you could possibly be, because if there is any single player who plays your champion and is higher rated than you, then that is proof that you could be better. If you play a champion and there is any one player who's higher rated, there's one player who is Challenger, then that is proof you can hit Challenger with that champion, and the only reason you're not there is that you're not good enough. Starting from Diamond, tracking the jungle becomes something that every player needs to start doing. While you could previously get away with just warding and avoiding ganks, you really need to start planning further ahead now. Avoiding a gank isn't enough because, like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is where poor wave management becomes unforgivable. An example would be if you're playing bottom lane and you mindlessly begin pushing the wave when the enemy jungler is pathing down. While you try to finish pushing in that wave, you spot the enemy jungler on a ward that you placed. Unfortunately for you, you're under way too much pressure to completely push in the wave, and now the enemy bot lane can create a freeze. The enemy jungler can continue hovering around the area, and when you're in position, you either have to risk dying to a gank or give up a huge amount of farm. Finally, this is the ranks where officially poor laning is now completely inexcusable. You may have hit Diamond with great teamfighting, roams, or macro play, but you won't get any further without, at minimum, passable laning phase. Even if you have incredible knowledge and amazing macro play, you won't be able to act on this if you're consistently getting destroyed during the laning phase. In other words, you won't get to utilize your other skills because you can't even make it to the point in the game where it would become relevant. Practice your laning and do your best to consistently come out even or ahead, and learn to play around bad lane matchups well enough that you can remain relevant. Anyway, that's going to conclude this video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Make sure to check out ProGuides.com as well, and our YouTube channel for more informational content. If you guys are serious about improving in climbing, make sure to check them out, and also note that we do have coaches on our website that are readily available to help you improve right now. So until next time, good luck on the Rift, and check out ProGuides.com.